Ferrari's 2025 Formula One season has been nothing short of a nightmare so far. With high hopes and an aggressive new concept in the SF25, the team expected to be fighting at the front consistently. Instead, they've found themselves trapped in a cycle of underperformance, unexplained inconsistency, and setup struggles that have left fans and insiders scratching their heads. But there may finally be a light at the end of the tunnel, and that light is coming in the form of a major setup breakthrough. Ferrari believe they've made ahead of the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka. Based on critical data collected during the Chinese Grand Prix sprint weekend, Ferrari now think they've pinpointed a fundamental flaw in their race setup and might be on the verge of unleashing the true potential hidden within the SF25. The heart of this potential turnaround is the unique structure of a sprint weekend. Unlike a traditional Grand Prix format, sprint weekends offer teams the rare opportunity to gather valuable data over two different race distances using two very different fuel loads, about 35 kilograms for the sprint race and a full 100 kilograms for the Sunday Grand Prix. For Ferrari, this difference proved to be a goldmine of information. What they noticed was a significant performance swing between the two formats, even though the basic setup of the car remained the same across both sessions. That variation opened the door to some serious questions about how the SF25 behaves under different weight conditions. In the sprint race, Ferrari, particularly with Lewis Hamilton, saw impressive pace. Hamilton was able to pull away and build a commanding gap during the 19-lap sprint, giving fans a rare glimpse of what the SF25 is capable of when it's working correctly. However, in the full-length Grand Prix, that performance vanished almost completely. The same car, same driver, and same track conditions, yet the pace was nowhere to be seen. The only difference? The fuel load. That stark contrast led engineers to one conclusion. There's a fundamental issue with how the SF25 handles when it's carrying a full tank of fuel. The focus quickly shifted to the rear suspension setup. According to everything Ferrari have gathered, the stiffness levels in the rear suspension appear to be directly responsible for pushing the car out of its optimal working window when the fuel load increases to 100 kilograms. In simpler terms, the rear of the car can't cope with the added weight. It becomes unstable, loses the ability to maintain a consistent aerodynamic platform, and ultimately drops performance across an entire race distance. This issue doesn't stem from the design of the suspension itself. Whether it's push rod or pull rod doesn't matter here. Instead, the problem lies in the tuning of that suspension, specifically its stiffness. At low fuel, such as during qualifying or sprint race stints, the current stiffness setting allows the car to operate within a stable window. The aerodynamic platform remains consistent, and as a result, the drivers can extract performance. But when you load up the SF25 with a full race tank, that same suspension setting no longer works. The car begins to roll more, loses rear-end stability, and drops out of the ideal aero performance range. Understanding this fuel-related behavior was the breakthrough Ferrari desperately needed. With this discovery, they were able to feed all that data back into their simulator systems in Maranello. Ferrari, alongside McLaren, have some of the most advanced simulator tools in the paddock. These tools allow them to replicate real-world conditions down to incredibly fine details, and they've now used those simulations to explore new setup directions. Over the 2 weeks following the Chinese Grand Prix, the Ferrari engineers have been hard at work testing stiffer rear suspension settings, adjusting their mechanical grip balance, and reworking their ride height strategies, all in an effort to find a setup that keeps the SF25 within its optimal performance window, even with a full fuel load. The belief inside the team is that they've now identified a working window that resolves this issue. If that proves true, Ferrari could be about to unlock a completely different level of performance. Suzuka, with its high-speed corners and demanding layout, is the perfect testbed for such a change. The track demands aerodynamic stability and mechanical grip in equal measure. If Ferrari's new setup delivers, it could be the weekend they finally put the puzzle pieces together and return to the sharp end of the grid. That said, there are still some major unknowns. All of Ferrari's progress up to this point has come in the simulator. While these tools are incredibly powerful, They're not a perfect replacement for real-world conditions. There's always a gap between theory and practice in Formula One, and Ferrari will need to see if the new setup actually works once the wheels hit the tarmac in Japan. The team is hopeful but cautious. After all, they've had strong Fridays before, only to fall away over the course of the weekend. Another major factor that could throw a wrench into Ferrari's plans is the weather. There's currently about a 50% chance of rain during the Japanese Grand Prix weekend. Wet conditions would make it almost impossible to get consistent data on how the SF25 behaves with its new setup under dry race fuel loads. If it rains throughout the weekend, Ferrari may have to wait until the next dry race to fully validate their work. On the flip side, if the race is mixed, part dry and part wet, it could give them just enough dry running to test the key areas they've targeted for improvement. Even with all these uncertainties, what's clear is that Ferrari's issue hasn't been a lack of raw speed. The performance is in the car. We saw glimpses of it with Hamilton's sprint drive in China and flashes during earlier sessions this season. The problem has always been about how to extract that performance consistently over a full race distance. With this new understanding of the rear suspension's behavior under load, they may finally have the missing piece of the puzzle. It's also important to consider the bigger picture. If Ferrari really have cracked the code, the benefits won't just be limited to Suzuka. Every race weekend moving forward could see them much more competitive, particularly in Sunday races where they've struggled the most. This change could allow their drivers to finally push from start to finish, manage tyres more effectively, and avoid the sudden drop-offs in performance that have plagued their Grand Prix performances in Australia and China. Ferrari fans will also be pleased to know that this new setup doesn't require major hardware changes. Because the issue lies in setup tuning and not fundamental car design, Ferrari can implement these changes without needing to wait for a new chassis or redesigned suspension components. That means they can roll out these changes right away and continue refining them as the season progresses.